Are you marketing yourself authentically, or are you falling into the social media trap? That's the question we look to answer today on Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And our special guest, the author, speaker, marketing expert, and entrepreneur, Corey Perlman. Today, it's all about that authentic marketing. Corey, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jerry. I appreciate it. Those of you who
Thanks
are
for being
listening,
on.
appreciate it. Hope it'll be valuable to you, this conversation. Yeah, I've been in the business for, over a decade, about 15 years, and it's changed so much. Obviously in the beginning with MySpace and moving over to Facebook and all the different sites that have come and gone. And I've been through it all. And I started my career with the e-commerce division of General Motors, and we were helping car dealers figure out the internet. So early on, we had people who were skeptical and not super tech savvy. And so I had to learn early in my career that I had to make it fun and easy to digest, or they would ignore us. And I've been doing that ever since. So I wrote my first book called eBoot Camp, which were the principles from that workshop. That was back in 2009. So don't buy that book. Very dated. 5 years later, I wrote another book called Social Media Overload. That was for people that just were overwhelmed and deprived of time because of social, which we still are today. And then my latest book is Authentically Social, which we'll get into. I run an agency, so we do the social media marketing for businesses. So the things that I say, it's not that I read in a book or listened to a podcast. It's that we're doing with our clients some of the things that have worked and some of the things that we'll talk about that didn't work, and everything in between. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And, that really resonates. When I wrote my book, Destination Employer, same concept. We want to focus on the things, excuse me, that work, and not the hypotheses that you often see trotted around. So let me ask you a question, Corey. You mentioned 2009, 2014, and now 2024. Marketing books especially tend to date pretty quick because trends change. How different is the market today from that first book in 2009?
Yeah, Jerry, so a lot has changed since 2009. I would definitely say the strategies are completely different, but a lot of the fundamental rules remain the same, I would say. So, platforms come and go. The way the algorithm, picks up content has changes dramatically. A few years ago, it was horizontal video was what reigned supreme. Today, vertical, so things change all the time. But the rules, I would say, and that's a lot of what I put in this latest book, have remained the same, and I think will into the future. One rule, for example, would be, add value, talk in terms of their interests, not your own. That will never change. If we come on here and we start talking about ourselves all day long, people will leave. And that would have been the case in 2024 and 2004. So those things all stay the same. But yeah, man, I used to be frustrated, Jerry, that things change so fast, but I would also say it's job security for me that things change so fast. So,
Well, that's funny. I'll say, Corey, I think that algorithmic concerns are legitimate and real, but I also feel like in some instances, people should mentally swap out the word algorithm for audience. Because if they're creating content that's not resonating, clicking with their target audience, that's not the algorithm. That's something you need to fix. Have you
it's a
seen
great
that to be
point.
the case?
Yes, and I like the way you say that. People will ask me a lot about the algorithm, and they'll get into the nitty gritty of what the machine wants. But to your point, the machine wants what the audience wants. So I like the way you said that. And if you focus on your audience, the good news is you should be very congruent with the machine. An example of that is, LinkedIn really wants conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the algorithm wants. Well, so does the audience. The audience
Yeah,
wants to be able to converse with you. They don't want you to be, a one-way channel. They want to be able to communicate with you. So LinkedIn will reward you for an audience that communicates back to you.
agree. Interestingly, so do most of the platforms, like YouTube, for example. If you have more likes and comments, the algorithm is more likely to push that out. LinkedIn, similar, likes, comments, shares, reposts, that sort of thing tends to advance the material. And then again, there are some algorithmic things. LinkedIn in my experience, doesn't care for links that pull you off platform, which doesn't, it's not hard to see why. LinkedIn, I think a lot of folks lose sight of the fact that much like YouTube is Google's ad and marketing platform, LinkedIn is Microsoft's ad and marketing platform.
That's
So
right.
anything that pulls you away is going to be a problem. But your focus, your newest book, I'd love to hear more about that, especially again in a world where, and audience, we were talking before we got started about how LinkedIn is becoming almost like another Facebook. So with that in mind, with your new book, the changes that you've seen, what are the main things?
Yeah. So the new book, as you can see over my shoulder here, is called Authentically Social. And to your point, what I try to do when I write a book is really feel like there's a need in the marketplace for it, not just to get a book out, but to answer a question that I get a lot in the marketplace with my clients and also audiences when I speak on stages. And the question I get a lot is, what type of content is resonating? Why am I not seeing more engagement? Why am I not seeing more results with my social? And when I go out and I look at individuals, but also big time brands, businesses, small businesses, what I notice is it looks like a billboard or a brochure. Their social media looks like something you might see on a TV commercial or on a billboard or when you're flipping through a brochure. And that's not what it's supposed to do. Social media channels work very differently than advertising and marketing materials, and they should be treated differently. And like we said earlier, they are a conversation, and the first word is social. And so, what I need to help businesses, and what that was the goal of the book, is what can they do to um, create more transparency, more authenticity, vulnerability, all those words that, people are like, oh, that's, but we can figure out ways to make your business, help people get behind the scenes, see the real you, see your team, that type of thing, that do resonate more with the audience and keeps you from looking like a billboard or brochure. So the nature of the book is to help steer businesses away from being phoning it in, commercial looking, kind of stodgy, kind of corporate, and more friendly and authentic and transparent.
You said so many things I want to comment on. So first of all, that's great. I think it's very timely, and I couldn't agree more. Some of that really heavily corporate marketing stuff that I see on LinkedIn, it looks more like it came out of the legal department than the marketing department, and it's nearly as engaging. So so I couldn't agree more. One of the things I've seen, so I do a fair amount of employer branding work in my practice, but again, it's tied specifically to employer branding. So what image are you putting out into the marketplace to ensure that the top talent that's culturally aligned with your organization is being drawn to your organization, and the folks that aren't culturally aligned are frankly being pushed back a little bit. Um, and the way that we do that is we have the corporate branding, and we also focus on key personnel alignment with the corporate branding. And to your point, again, making sure it's the people side. People, in
Right.
my experience, don't connect with companies; they connect with the people in them. So the
That's right.
more that we can filter that corporate message through real people's mouths with their authentic voices, the more effective I've found that it resonates. In addition, the more we focus on things that are happening in their lives, because the more that again, my target audience typically being on the candidate side of things, the more that people can see themselves working for or engaging with that brand, the more likely they are to follow and engage with any recruiting effort or anything like that. So yeah, that's awesome. Now, do you typically work predominantly picking on LinkedIn because we were with the company page, or do you typically push through the personal pages as well?
We do both. But I will always tell people, if you're listening right now, you're a business owner or you're a marketing person within a business, and you're trying to do more on LinkedIn, the personal pages are preferred, are priority. Because again, as we said earlier, LinkedIn wants to build a conversation. And so it's easier to converse with individuals than it is with businesses. So the company pages have a place and we certainly promote them and market them, but the real work is done on the personal pages to answer your question. Um, and just to go back to your point, just one last thing on that. every time I'm on stage, say I'm talking to, a bunch of, let's just say, real estate agents, and I'll look at all their pages and I'll go to their Facebook, their LinkedIn, their Instagram. And so this isn't just stuff I'm saying. I will scroll through, and every single time I'll see no engagement, 1 like, 2 likes, and then all of a sudden I'll see 21 likes. Well, what's the difference? Oh, wow. It's real people. Now, who are these people? Well, sometimes it's their team. Maybe they had a staff meeting on Friday and they took a picture. Maybe they're celebrating somebody's birthday. Maybe they have their clients that just sold a house. Those always get more engagement. And then the next thing is, a picture of a house. Or the next thing is, 6 reasons to buy a house now. Again, back to 2 likes, 3 likes. So every time, doesn't matter the platform, I scan through. The most popular posts are the ones, like you said, that are human and that tell some sort of story. And if you can, add some value.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense here. I'll tell you. So, my company has 2 company pages. We have Redbeard Solutions, that's our consulting company's company page, and we have Destination Employer, that's the book and the educational programs company pages. Then, unsurprisingly, given what we do, all of our folks have robust personal pages. It's actually part of how they're measured. Part of their KPI is their engagement and their stuff. In part because I don't ever want one of our clients to say, well, your guys don't do it. Why should I have mine do it? I never want to be in that place. But anyways, so just like you described, our corporate pages tend to get a lot less engagement than our personal pages, which is not surprising. But to this day, our most engaged article on our Redbeard Solutions company page, one of our folks had a daughter, and we took one of those old Western wanted posters, and we put her, her baby hospital picture in the center, and we cut out wanted, and we put in a new team member alert, and we announced the birth. And obviously it has nothing, but we announced it like she was new to the team, like it was a new hire, and it crushed. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. You just totally nailed it. I have another example just to really nail this point home to the audience. We had a high executive that was in a very big time company, and he had entrusted us to help him do more with his LinkedIn. And the first 6 months, he wouldn't let us go down that direction you talked about. It was very corporate, very professional. And he was very disappointed with the results he was getting. And so he brought us in and he said, I'm open to suggestions on how to do this better. I said, we just got to get more humanized. So he, and you mentioned daughter, one of his first posts, and I don't want to scare anybody that you don't necessarily have to put your children on there, but in this case, it was his child. But there was and I will say this, there was a thread to his business that was a part of this story, similar to your story. And it was that his daughter had graduated the program that he was, essentially working through, the training company. And he was so proud of her. And he was just sharing the story of how proud he was of his daughter to graduate this particular program. And you mentioned it crushed. And he came back and he's like, oh my gosh. And we're like, yeah, you just became a human again. Congratulations, and now his LinkedIn is killing it because he has taken that and run with it. And he tells personal stories. He shares anecdotes. He gets real, still adds value. He still serves others, but he does it in a way that's much more personal, and it's working great.
I think the fear may be for many that when someone like you or I say personal, what they hear is unprofessional. And that doesn't need to be the case. So I've got clients that are, some of the largest management consulting firms in the world, law firms, things like that. They have a very buttoned down, formal brand, and necessarily so. They obviously want to be taken seriously. They do serious work. But that doesn't mean you can't talk about things through the voice of your folks. You just, you don't want them to show up with a Hawaiian shirt and, a CBD gummy in their hand. Probably that's probably not what we're looking for. but you can do it in a way that's still very professional. It sounds like that executive nailed
it. So I say something because people get hung up on this a lot. So I'm really glad you brought it up, especially on LinkedIn. I tell people, and you guys, if you're taking notes or whatever, but burn this into your brain if you can, if you're interested. Be yourself at work is what I tell people
Yes.
on LinkedIn. Be yourself at work. And so that, and I tell employees that and stuff like that. So it's a reminder. It's not the casual Facebook. It's not the casual X or whatever. It's not, vacation photos like you mentioned all the time, or like, whatever. But you can still bring the human side of you and your business and your brand, but you can keep it professional and keep it within, the guidelines that you want it to be. So be yourself at work.
Yeah, and that's key, and not to riff off the title of your book, but human people are human people. Now I sound like Zuckerberg. People are natural authenticity filters. They
Yeah.
can smell corporate speak coming out of your mouth from a mile away. It's like halitosis. So,
Mm-hmm.
so if you don't come across as authentic, they're going to tune you out. They're going to assume this is something salesy or marketing. It's going to be a turnoff. But authentic, to our point earlier, doesn't have to mean unprofessional. I
Mm-hmm.
can send a picture of the President's Club party that we had. I just don't want to send the closing time picture.
Right.
So
Right.
so that's, I think, the key.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, be, part of being authentic, Jerry, is making sure that you don't do anything you're uncomfortable with online. People ask me about TikTok all the time and should I be on there? We can go in that if you want, but I always say, if that's not your jam, and if that, you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, it certainly is not going to come off as authentic. And if anything, it's going to come off in the totally opposite way than you want it to. So the more people can be themselves, the better they do. And the key to that is people always think that they got to be a certain way on social. I got to be energetic. I got to be enthusiastic. I got to be with this. No, no, no. There are some introverts that I could show you that kill on social, that are doing great. And we're polar opposites. They're very laid back. They're very reserved. But what their superpower is value in the words that they share, and people are totally willing to hear the monotone stuff if the value is there. So you don't have to portray yourself in any sort of way on social. All you need to do is double down on your strengths and be yourself. That's authentic. That's authentically social.
Completely agree. I like to dial back to something you said earlier about that realtor and the 6 ways to sell a house. I do feel like that type of material has a place because that's one of the things they would want to follow a realtor for. I think the way it's delivered is very relevant, and its tempo. So, like, for example, every Sunday I do a Sunday Funnies. It's just some type of business meme that I find amusing that's relevant to the type of work we do. It adds no value from an educational or engagement sense. It's just funny and it's Sunday and who cares? And my audience is a little more complex than many because I actually have arguably four audiences. I am the primary salesperson for my company, so my sales audience are small business owners, startup founders, early stage leaders. I also hire a lot of folks, so recruiters, digital marketers, copywriters, those types of folks. And then I do some of the senior level recruiting for the company and the executive search stuff. So I also get like senior job seeker types. So I have a kind of a striated market. And I try to talk to people as best I can, across those areas. So I've got a little bit broader target than most. And so I've got to balance, like I said, the educational stuff so that people have a reason to continue to follow me with not boring them until they fall asleep reading. So what do you find is a good tempo in, say, a LinkedIn for social media for outreach styles?
Yeah, and you're right. As I was sort of riffing that example, when I said that line, I'm so glad you picked up on it. In my mind, I was like, of the ones I was saying, the more the marketing stuff and all that, the 6 ways to why it's important to buy a house now actually was a poorer example. And you're absolutely right, because that does fall into the category of adding value. And again, you're right in that if you just put up a piece, like a white paper, and it has the 6 things, well, they're kind of goes to my point more. But if it's, a quick video and says, hey, everybody, I'm walking through this house right now, and I wanted to share with you 5 things that you can do if you're selling your home, that's the energy, that's the passion we're looking for. It's still the same content, but delivered in a different way. So I want to totally agree with you on that. So going to your question about frequency. And so what we do with clients, I think this is really important to share this now. Every client that we work with is we create a content calendar with them. And so what that does is we can look at a month or a week, and we can make sure that we're filling multiple buckets, so that, to your point, everything doesn't look like a one-trick pony. It's not just like if you just, since we're riffing off of the real estate example, if you went to a real estate agent's page and you saw nothing but houses, and you're just seeing that every day, but at most would agree that is not what we're looking to do. So if we're working with that person, or that agency, or that company, we're going to look at creating a digital story. And one of the chapters of that story is showing inventory. Great. We got one down, but we got more to tell. So what's another chapter? Well, let's talk about our team. They need to know, like, we're super passionate about real estate. We're fun. We're easy to work with. So how can we do that? Good. So that's another chapter. What's another chapter? You mentioned funny. There's a lot of humor in real estate. They see like memes and people are pulling their hair out for interest rates and stuff. How can we have a little fun on Friday or on Sunday? That's another chapter. Another chapter, which a friend of mine does, which I love, is he's super connected into the community. So he wants to forget real estate. This is all about, if you're moving to wherever you live. I live in Roswell, Georgia. If you live in this town, I'm going to give you some inside scoops when you move in here. So one of the things he did is he showed the Christmas light tour, all the best places to see Christmas lights. That was one of his most engaged posts the entire season. Nothing to do with real estate, but all to do with serving his audience of people who are moving in to Roswell. So that's another chapter, and so on and so forth. So we create a story, a digital story that has multiple chapters. And when we look down at the month of content, we make sure that all of those chapters are filled with content.
You bring up something that I'd like to talk about, and it's a little bit of an aside, so I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot. But one of the things I tell people, especially very early stage, is that it's usually not in your interest to try to master all of the platforms. What I tell them is to pick a primary platform where you're going to do most of your work, in a secondary platform. Then as you grow and your resources increase, start looking at other platforms for theirs. Now, I work nationally and I work in the business scene, so LinkedIn is obvious. My second one was YouTube. But for somebody like you described, a real estate agent, especially not a brokerage, but an individual agent, they essentially run their own mini business. Most of them, at least as far as my memories of that industry, were essentially are their own desk. So is it worth it for them to build up, say, a LinkedIn presence, or are there other platforms that make more sense for them that can focus more on local markets?
Yeah, I want to say that, I've done a lot of podcast interviews, and not always do I, and maybe we'll disagree at some point, but we keep agreeing. And so I don't want everybody to, but we're cut from the same cloth. I mean, you'll notice in my book, the first or second or third chapter is prioritize the platforms. Pick a few, and don't be a jack of all social media sites, master of none. And again, I'm not just saying that. I've witnessed over the years where businesses try to be in all places. And what happens is they do it all mediocre at best, and they pull resources such from LinkedIn to do other things like TikTok. And so instead of crushing LinkedIn, like we talked about earlier, they got a presence there, but they're spread too thin, just bottom line. So I agree. Let's pick a platform or two, or at most 3. And then the question is where should you pick? Which platform should you pick? And that has to do with who your audience is and who your audience is going to be in the near future. So again, I get asked daily about TikTok, and my answer has been for the longest time to beware. And part of the reason is because it's such a young audience. 13 to 26 has been the primary demographic of that tool. I got a teenage daughter. I mean, they're all over it. And obviously, as years have gone on, that has crept up a little bit. So each year, that sentiment, I have to kind of evaluate that and decide if I believe that most of my clients should stay away from it. And that still is my thought, especially with everything that's going on with TikTok and such. But of course, if I'm talking to, a business owner that markets to a younger generation, then yeah, TikTok, I'm all over it. I mean, yes, but if I'm talking to you or some of your colleagues and they're, 35 and above, they're professionals, they're executives, we're not talking TikTok. We're talking LinkedIn. Now, you mentioned YouTube. I typically draw a line in the sand with YouTube because I don't look at it as a social media platform as much as I do the other ones. It's a given to me that YouTube is an important asset, but it doesn't have the same interactivity mostly as some of these other platforms. So when I don't use it as one of my social media priorities, I say, yes, it's of value, like I do a website or a local directory or something like that. But when I think of social media, I think of, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X tends to be the 5 that I talk about most. And the 2 that I tend to focus on most with the businesses that I work with are LinkedIn and Instagram. And the reason is Facebook they're struggling a bit, they get a lot of bad press. So the joke is that you mentioned Zuckerberg, he's got a lot of bad press out there and all that. And so people are anti-Facebook and they're leaving Facebook and they're running to Instagram, which the ironic thing most people know is that, Meta, owns Instagram. So who cares? They don't care. They're getting their money either way. But it's backed by Facebook. So they have that backing. I've seen, and so have you in my history, where tools have come out and people have been so excited about them and then they've died and they're gone. Periscope, Snapchat, although it's still here and the kids are using it, when it came out 5 years ago or whatever it was going to take over Instagram and Facebook. It was the platform that everyone was talking about. And that model is gone. No one on business really talks about Snapchat anymore. You think about Google Plus. Now a big conglomerate, Google, comes out and says, we're going to take over the social media world and we're going to create a social media platform. And everyone was asking me about Google Plus. Stay the course. Wait, let's see what happens. They killed it. Another one that came out, Clubhouse, came out a year or two ago. Some of you may have not even heard of it. Then you had Threads from Instagram that was supposed to compete with X. They had the fastest growth of any social platform ever, and everyone ran to it. And then they had the fastest decline of any user. So you just my advice is, I'm not normally like this, but take it slow, be practical around these sites. Yes, the people who jump in first do get a bonus. There's no doubt about that. So I recognize that advantage. But too many times I've seen businesses throw a bunch of resources into a platform only to see it die a slow death.
I
So
agree.
That's my answer.
I think there's something that needs to be remembered about the overall theme what we're talking about. So there's for sure a first mover advantage. That's not been news since forever. But when it comes to any type of a social media site, it's the network effect that's relevant. If something doesn't achieve a significant enough network effect, it doesn't matter how awesome it is. So
Right.
To your point, I once again, we're in agreement. I think it's worth the risk of losing early mover advantage to make sure that entity is going to get a network effect such that it can displace the incumbent. Because second and third place in social media usually is just a different way to say out of business.
Yep.
And why invest the energy?
That's right. Yep, you're absolutely right, and I'm guilty of it too, Jerry. I when Threads came out on Instagram, we were all over it, and and took resources away from different places, and created and we're still there, but I don't know what the future is going to hold for it or anything, but they could very easily close its doors. I would not be surprised.
And the thing that's crazy is once you achieve a certain level of network effect, your resilience becomes amazing. Facebook being a great example. Everybody makes fun of it. Most people are still on it. Twitter/X. Elon Musk's tenure has been, let's call it rocky. And everybody hates on it, but they're not leaving.
That's right.
So
you're right.
Even though there are other vehicles that they could use, they're not leaving.
I remember, just to your point, like we're all could be like the one example, but I took X off my phone for like a solid 3 months. I was just like, and it's not political or anything like that. I just got tired of the content I was seeing, and it was just kind of like making me feel bad. So I took it off my phone, and I was like one of those people who left X. Oh my gosh, but then slowly but surely, as somebody sends me a text with a link to X, and next thing you know, it's back on my phone. So just to echo your point, it's like it is really hard to break away from a channel.
So I work and try really hard to walk the walk that I teach. I as a consultant, it's important to me that my company and I exemplify the things that we're trying to get other people to do. So to that point, I already feel like I'm a little bit overextended on social media. I do LinkedIn, again, YouTube, the podcast. There's just a lot that I do, and as a business owner, I just don't have the time to do more. I know I should be on X. I know that I should, because especially in my business, there's a lot of folks there. I just don't hate myself enough to be there yet. Number one, because it's such a dumpster fire. But number two, now I find myself being pulled in because it happened again. I was just asked to be on a live panel, and it's going to be on X. And I'm like, well, I'm not on X. They're like, well, you need to get on X. So I was like,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's a reason to get on there. And that's funny. Yeah, I love the way you said that. I don't hate myself enough. Because mental health, right? Let's throw that in here. That's important. For those of you who are sticking with us here and listening, you can, I'm sure you'd echo this too, that your mental health comes first. And don't listen to me about any profile that might do you some good if it's harming your ability to feel good, or to if it's not doing you a service, then by all means leave. And there's one thing I can mention about that, Jerry. In my book, I actually have a chapter on mental health, and it's when I first expose myself in some form or fashion there that I am not physically on social media that much. I am a social media quote unquote expert. I go on stage, I talk about social, I own an agency, and yet I do not physically go on there very often. And you can too. And I kind of share how I do that. And so I'm clear with everybody that, don't get me wrong, this is my content. I'm on here, I'm researching, I'm delivering the value or whatever. But the people who are pressing the buttons and putting me on Instagram, and the sticker and the poll and the music and the this, and then on LinkedIn, the caption and the title and all that stuff that goes into it that gives you and I a headache, I don't do that. Somebody else does that. I'm kind of crossed that age barrier where that's not my jam anymore. So I fired myself and hired my team to do that for me. So I can be on social media. I can have people come up to me, Jerry, and be like, man, slow down, bro. You are like on there all the time. Like that article you posted yesterday. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I know I wrote it, but I don't know when it was posted. They do. And so there is a way, and I'm totally okay with it. And I think it's authentic for you to step away from the tools on social media, be the content creator, and let somebody else do the heavy lifting.
You said something that I want to kind of tangent off of, about firing yourself and hiring your team. One of the things I think it's important for small business owners to remember is that in the beginning, it's only them, and then it's a small team, and then it's a bigger team and a bigger team until you get to either where you want to be or you continue to grow. But that ability to iterate in the beginning, yeah, it probably is going to be you. In the beginning, Corey, I'm sure it was you doing all that stuff. But once you get to a point, one of the best things you can do as a leader is to focus on the place that you add the most value. And that probably, for those of us, I hate to be ageist, but for those of us over 50, it's probably not graphically designing a thumbnail for a LinkedIn post.
Exactly.
That's probably not it. And if it is, unless you're a graphic designer, of course, you probably need to answer some questions about whether you should be leading the team.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to remember, is that, again, in the beginning, it's going to be you by necessity. But as you develop, again, focus on where you can add the most value for your organization and push everything else out.
That's right. And you're right. 100%. When I first came on, it was me pressing all the buttons and doing all the things. And And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and bootstrappers can feel that, but I also say that, there are levels to farming it out, right? You can hire an agency like
For
us
sure.
that can be a little bit more expensive, but there are levels lower than that. There are interns, there's Upwork, or, some of these tools out there that, and you have to also be okay with, you pay for what you get, but if you're a perfectionist, that's gonna compete against what you and I are talking about here. So I always say, I'd rather it be done than perfect. And so if you start having other people involved in your social media, it's not going to be exactly how you would do it. That's okay. Consistency is the key in this platform. We were just looking, Jerry, at a client on his LinkedIn, and we were looking at his engagement numbers and his LinkedIn newsletter numbers. And this is a flooring company. It's not anything super, sexy for that matter, but steady growth, steady. It was like 40%, 60%. And he's asking, like, why? And one of the reasons why is just consistency. It's just LinkedIn starting to get used to what he's doing. He's starting to pull in a tribe that is interested in the content. So they got a base, then they start showing it. So it takes time. And so what he was seeing is that mountain climb, and a lot of us jump off the mountain before we get to the other side. And he's been doing this for a year now. And it's called Ask Jason. And so we will take questions from his customers and he'll answer them. And it is starting to really work. But if he would have looked at his numbers in the very beginning, Jerry, he probably would have quit because he had like 6 people. Take some time, be consistent. And he had to get out of his own way and let us do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's one of the harder things as a founder is to know, do I stick with the plan? Do I stay the course, or do I pivot? And that's one of the hardest decisions to make, and probably more than we have time for. So I do want to cover one more thing that you touched on, whether it's internal, where those interns, are you hiring a team inside, or are you hiring an external agency? I think one of the things that scares founders and leaders, and you touched on it, is, oh my gosh, is it going to feel authentic if somebody else does it? It's not exactly the way I do it. One of the things I've found that mitigates that, especially for internal teams, is instead of looking at delegation as a switch you flip, look at it as a continuum. So especially internally, I always do the me, us, you methodology. You watch me do it, we do it together, then you do it, and I watch, and then I'm out. And I found that can be very successful when it comes to especially something you're scared of.
Yeah, I mean, once again, folks, listen to this guy, Jerry. He knows what he's talking about. You're absolutely right. We have seen over the years, the nightmare situations are when a business owner takes his keys, his social media keys, and he drops them off to somebody else and he walks away. It's a recipe for disaster. Absolutely. We are not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is you can hand over the keys, but you better stay in the car and you better drive right alongside with them. So what does that look like? Yeah, that looks like, monthly meetings. We always have meetings with the client and we talk about what we posted and what's coming up. They may say, June or July, it's summer months. This is what's happening. This is the product we're offering. We've got a special thing going on now. We got, this is a hot topic we need to avoid, blah, blah, blah. Political season's coming up, all those things to let us know to avoid catastrophe. We can share numbers. We can pivot if we need to pivot based upon the results that we're seeing. So when our clients are happy and with us long term, they are meeting with us consistently. When we lose clients, it's because there's a disconnect between us and them, and they're not liking what they're seeing on social, and that's happened, plenty of times. So yes, stay involved, stay close to it, be a supporter, and don't make the social media person or team feel isolated. Make them feel part of the team. Include them on things, and you will find a nice, smooth transition, I think, that you will be proud of. But stay connected for sure.
100%. You touched on something that's kind of third rail and radioactive, but I do want to mention, because we are in an election year, when it comes to any divisive topic, my advice is always the same. if it's something that's important to your company's culture and that you have legitimate, strong feelings about, don't shy away from it because it's a part of your company's culture. It's a part of what you are. And are you going to be happy working with somebody that's the opposite perspective on that issue? Probably not. But if it isn't, I remember seeing a T-shirt last election cycle that said Republican, Democrat, entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs was the box that was checked. If it's something that isn't really important to you, why third rail it? Why touch the radioactive diaper? There's no win in that. But if it is, I do say embrace it, lean into it. Since it's politics, if you're a deep red company or a deep blue company, and that's the reality of your culture, again, it's going to cost you business, 100% yes. But is it business that you would want? Probably not.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. It's going in eyes wide open to it at least. If you are, you and I both know businesses that are in certain climates that they know that I always say when you talk politics, you're going to piss off 51 or 49% of your audience. But in your point in some of those examples, it might be 95% and 5. Right. And you're like, I'm good with that. And if that's the case, that's the beauty of social media is that it's yours, and you get the opportunity to talk about what you want to talk about. But yeah, generally speaking, anything that is, off the table at the Thanksgiving table with your in-laws should be off the table with your social media sites as well. Politics, religion, things like that. We try to be, topics that people can get excited about, that and want to have conversations about. But the old adage is that no social media persona or expert has ever changed the opinion of a political whatever. So it ain't going to start now with yours. So maybe avoid if you can.
I completely agree. I use politics as an example because it's an election year. But like, for example, I'm a former Marine sergeant, disabled veteran. I feel strongly about veterans' rights and about how veterans are treated post-military. So that's not something I ever shy away from. If you can't afford to bring them to war, we shouldn't be there. Story's over, So I feel strongly about that.
That's a great example. And thank you for that kind of other example, because that's a perfect example of where, yes, share your values, be your values. Don't shy away from your values if that's a core value for your company. And there's not a lot of people who are going to disagree with that anyway, but that's okay if they do, because that's your values and you'll go to the grave feeling good about that decision. So by all means, if it's a core value of you and your company, social media not only is a place for it, but people will appreciate it. And just one other thing on that, Jerry, people like to do business with people they like, and people like to do business with people doing good in the world. And so by you sharing that, not only will that connect them more with you personally and your personal story, like I didn't know that, and that makes me like you even more. It also, when people agree with you, which they will, it makes them want to honestly do business with you. It takes those walls down, and it makes me know that I am working with somebody who's also taking my money and doing good in the world. That's great.
Yeah, and so I work again predominantly as marketing is a tiny piece of what my company does, and what we do is 100% focused on employer brand. So in that space, especially, the real culture of your company and the way it is to work there is hyper relevant, because if you are portraying an image that's inaccurate to what people are going to experience, it's going to blow up in your face. You're going to have tenure problems. You're going to have retention problems. So the more that people can see themselves in your marketing, your branding, the more that marketing branding portrays an accurate image of the way things are, the fewer retention problems you have built in.
Yes.
So I feel like what I said in that context especially is that much more relevant. If you're a B2C brand and you have something that's somewhat transactional of a product like a Coca-Cola consumable or something like that, I think is maybe a little bit less relevant there and more risk than reward. But as it relates to employer brand, I think it's very important.
And one thing, Jerry, that people, a lot of business owners don't think about with what we're talking about in terms of sharing your culture and values is, to your point, employee engagement, retention, and recruitment. So just another benefit to being authentically social on social media is that when the future employees are looking to whether or not to work with you or not, they're going to go to your social and they're going to determine if it's a fit for them. And if they went to, say, yours, Jerry, and they see that, you and your team are passionate about veterans and how they're treated after they come back, and that resonates with them in their heart, that is going to be a huge selling point to them wanting to work with you. So not only from a customer standpoint, but also an employee engagement and recruitment standpoint, the more transparent and open you are about your culture and values, how you treat your team, as I mentioned, mental health, and all those things we've talked about, the more people are going to want to come and work for you.
Yeah, and there can be differences between the sales and marketing. The marketing and branding for sales and the marketing and branding for your internal. They just can't be in conflict. So the example I give in employer branding in my book is all of those silly insurance commercials, like the cavemen, the Geico gecko, the Aflac duck, the things like that. Those are all silly because it's a very serious topic and it's a way to broach it to a customer that's a little bit less alarming. But if you look at their employer brands, working there, there's not some lady dressed like a 1950s diner waitress walking down the hall. There's certainly not cavemen and white ducks. So obviously there's going to be differences. They just can't be in contradiction. So that, I think that's a key thing to remember as it relates, or from a value perspective, there can't be contradiction.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't thought about it that way.
So I think we could easily talk for 5 hours, but this feels like a good place to wrap up. Let me ask you this. So, Corey, I'm going to include if it's all right with you, your email address, your LinkedIn page, and also a link to buy your book on Amazon in the show notes. But for the audio people, where can they engage with you to speak for one of their events? Where can they engage with your company to work with you? You clearly have great ideas. I mean, they're similar to mine. How could they not be great? Okay. That was the most self-aggrandizing thing ever. But where can they find you, and what type of work can you help them with?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Maybe we could do a part 2 some point. But for
Awesome.
the speaking side, it's CoreyPerlman.com. So I'm Corey. There's an E in Corey, and Perlman without an A, Perlman. So CoreyPerlman.com. And then our agency is called Impact Social Media, and it's impactsocialmedia.com is our agency. You can learn more about how we work with companies and such. You'll put my email in there, so definitely check that out. And then I'm on all the social channels that we talked about. And yeah, a passion of mine is coming out and speaking to associations and companies about being authentically social. And then our agency, we really enjoy working with clients and helping take their vision, bring it to life online through these channels that you and I spoke about. So I really appreciate the time and really enjoyed this and look forward to doing it again.
I loved you being on the show, and as you're about to learn, never threaten me with a good time, because you're going to be hearing about number 2 coming up here soon enough. So as always, I thank everyone for giving us a listen. As I'd mentioned, Corey's information will be in the show notes, so you can go there to get in touch with them, and I strongly recommend that you do. If you haven't yet, please check out destinationemployer.co and look at the new program that we've created. It's a self-paced program to help companies consistently attract, recruit, and retain the top talent in their markets, and most importantly, to lead them into high-performing teams. So with that said, go out there, make something awesome, do something awesome, and I look forward to seeing you in the next show.
Thank you.